Kirk Ferentz says he will be back with the Hawkeyes in 2025. This is a good thing. Today, Locked On Hawkeye.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. While you're there, hit the subscribe button. Just takes a moment and helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. So it was signing day yesterday, and signing day, not what it once was in the world of chatter. The February signing day back in the day was a huge one. It was absolutely monstrous, and things changed. Things evolved. Now it is about the transfer portal, and we'll talk a little more about the transfer portal buzz coming up here a little bit later on in the show. Also have David Eicholt that's going to stop by. We'll talk some basketball and some football talk with him. And David's a guy that is deep into the recruiting world over at Hawkeye Insider, part of 24/7 Sports, one of the recruiting sites that are out there and the message boards and everything that goes along with it. So excited to get him in here. But we start with the press conference from yesterday with Kirk Ferentz. And Coach Ferentz mentioned that, yes, he'll be back. The question was asked by Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register. I'm planning on being back next year. And it's a fair question. It's a question that is going to be asked a whole lot more. By the time we get to next football season, Kirk Ferentz will be 70 years old, August 1st. And the questions are going to be there. Now, Kirk Ferentz physically does not appear to be your normal 70-year-old. I will tell you that much. You see, he's in good health. He still moves incredibly well. He doesn't have the feeling of when you think of a 7-year-old, but we're getting there. And I know that led to, for some Hawkeye fans, some consternation, some frustration, some people that are just looking for something different. Look, and I get it. I understand why people are ready for change. It's been more than a quarter century of Kirk Ferentz. For a lot of people, Kirk Ferentz is all they know. For me, I only know two. I'm in my mid-40s, and I've only seen two coaches at Iowa. I mean, you have to be in your 50s to have any memories of anything before Hayden Fry, which is absolutely incredible. Yet that's the reality. Two coaches in this span, it's unlike anything that we've ever seen. Kirk Ferentz is a guy that has a lot of strengths and plenty of weaknesses, and it doesn't matter what coach you're talking about. We can talk about the highest of highs. We can talk about the Bill Belichick's of the world. There are certain aspects, regardless of sport, regardless of who they are, you're going to get frustrated when you watch them time in and time out. The strengths are there. The disappointments are also there with Kirk Ferentz. But here's one reason that I'm very excited that Kirk Ferentz is going to be back is college football continues to change, evolve, and just look so completely different than what we're used to. To have a solid base, and that's what Kirk Ferentz has. I mean, you look through the tenure, you look at the successes, you look at what they've been able to do. Bowl eligible, 23 of the last 24 years. That just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in college football. And not just at a place like Iowa. Take a look at the Blue Bloods. Look at what happened to Florida State this year. What happened to Michigan before Harbaugh showed up? Remember, before Harbaugh won that Big Ten championship 2 years ago, they had gone 18 years without a Big Ten championship at Michigan. And it continues around the country. A lot of people's memory, Alabama, they just think of the Saban years. Remember, there was a long period well before that. Iowa has a solid base. Next year is going to be a rebuilding year. Next year is going to be a down year for Iowa football. How are they going to be able to fill in the gaps? How is the portal going to look? Those are all pertinent questions and all going to be important to the way that this thing sets up. But when you go through and you look at the way that Iowa is built, the way that they're going to be built going forward, having this in a transition year, having Kirk Ferentz back for another season is a good thing. I believe him coming back. Is Iowa going to win a national championship? No. How you can put Nick Saban here. They're not going to win a national championship. And the structure has become even that much more difficult. Not just the expanded Big Ten, but the path now to get there. We've seen them be close, be in the conversation. Go back to 2015, go back to 2009, 2002. You go back at those years, there was an outside chance. But even if they got to that game or got to the playoff in 2015, are they winning 2 games? Probably not. Now, are they winning at minimum 3, maybe 4 playoff games? It's not going to happen. And what we have is really good. What we have in this Iowa football program, there are 100 teams at the FBS level, more than 100, that would kill to have what Iowa football is. Yes, the offense gets stagnant. Yes, there's frustrations that grow in game decisions, clock management, all those things that pile up. But guess what? There isn't anybody that's perfect at it. There just isn't. That's where we are. Having Kirk Ferentz in this transition year coming back for another season is a good thing. And Kirk was kind of joking about it a little bit. In fact, when the rumblings are happening constantly. Look, I get messages from people. I talk to people relatively close to the program, those kind of things. And the whispers are always out there. But I maintained a year ago, there was a better chance of Kirk walking away last season than there was before this one. I mentioned this on my radio show earlier in the week before we even got to the press conference and the question that was asked. I think there was a lot more fuel to possibly him walking away after the firing of Brian than there is right now. And we've talked about that relationship and what's happening there. That's a different conversation. Kirk Ferentz is back, and that's okay. Now, what we know is Iowa's got work to do in the portal. There is a ton that needs to be done with this Iowa football team in the transfer portal if they're going to compete. If they're going to be a team that can even be bowl eligible next season, they have to improve. Defensive line, need help there. Defensive backfield, I think you need at least a body. Maybe even linebackers a spot. That's on the defensive side. You're always looking for wide receivers. They definitely need that, need an upgrade at that position. I also wonder about the running back spot. And we saw Kamari Moulton, they really like him, had the big run against Maryland. He had some moments, but are there going to be maybe some big-time transfer running backs that'll be looking at what Caleb Johnson was able to do in this offensive system and year number 1 at Tim Lester and say, you know what? Maybe that's the spot for me. Again, if there is a big-time running back willing to do that. Kamari Moulton's a nice back. Jazzy Patterson's fine. We'll see about the youngsters and Xavier Williams coming in and Brevin Dahl and what they ultimately can become. But if there is that big-time running back, I think at minimum, you got to be open to the possibility because I'm going to guess a few more doors are going to open at that running back spot. And then the offensive line. You got to figure out what's happening with Jennings Dunker, with Logan Jones. Are both of those guys going to be returning? It'd be a 6th year for Logan Jones. Jennings Dunker is going to have an opportunity at the next level. I'm sure the evaluation from the NFL is also going to be a piece of this and what those guys hear. And the if is you're going to have to go free agent route, late draft pick at best. I think the conversation becomes a whole lot different because remember, not like the old days. You can make some money and come back and make some pretty decent coin coming back for another season in Iowa City. Let's talk with David Eicholt from 24/7 Sports, HawkeyeInsider.com. Get his perspective on everything going on in the world of the Hawkeyes. A little basketball, a lot of football with David Eicholt. We continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5. You're going to get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. You're sitting on the couch. You think you got a hunch, right? You got this thing figured out. You're sitting there. It's time to fire away. But before you do that, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more right there on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
David Eicholt joins us. Busy time signing day in football. David Eicholt joins us. Recap the basketball. There's transfers, blah, blah, blah. You're a busy man, David Eicholt, HawkeyeInsider.com. How are you?
Doing well, guys. This is the month where if you thought I was caffeinated before, boys, nope, this is it. It's on full overdrive. Portal cycle, everything's going down, and I'll tell you this, and I've mentioned this on my board a few times. I think this is going to be unquestionably the most chaotic the transfer portal has ever been. I think Iowa is going to be as active as it has been in the past few years. I really think Iowa is going to be fairly aggressive in this cycle.
And obviously, the $1 million question is there a quarterback that comes Iowa's way? And seemingly there has to be a couple of big names out there. Are you any closer to, identifying some of those potential targets for Iowa? We know that some of the players have put out that, or somebody's put out that Iowa's interested in Moss. They're interested in the kid from A&M. What do you know as far as the quarterback?
Yeah, so Iowa is prepared to spend pretty big for a quarterback. I think they want a real difference maker, somebody that can at least push the wide receivers to be a little bit better than they actually are right now and continue their development. I do know that there's mutual interest between Miller Moss and Iowa, but I also think Iowa is on the outside looking in. When it comes to Miller Moss, I would project Missouri as the early favorite in this recruitment. When it comes to Miller Moss, Michigan is going to be right there as well. Louisville, I believe, is going to be the other team involved. But yeah, Connor Wegman, the Texas A&M quarterback, I think there's a real interest between the two parties. And quite frankly, I think he'd be worth the risk. He was a 5-star quarterback in the 2022 cycle by 24/7 Sports. He's the number one quarterback in the transfer portal by 24/7 Sports right now. Really did not have the best year last year. Did struggle through a little bit of an injury. And I know Iowa fans might be a little bit nervous about that after their past investment in Cade McNamara. But I also think you look at Connor Wegman, there are NFL intangibles with him. Proper size, he can escape the pocket, he can make throws at all three levels. Does need to be fine-tuned a little bit, but ultimately I think one of the biggest things that Iowa needs, quite frankly, might be to totally revamp the quarterback room. If that includes keeping Brendan Sullivan on and getting rid of everybody else, that includes getting rid of everybody. I think Tim Lester needs to have a room that fits his skill set and guys that he wants to develop within his play style. And so I'm kind of at this point when it comes to Tim Lester, I'm going to evaluate every quarterback. Fans are going to evaluate every quarterback. But until we really know what this Tim Lester offense is going to look like, the only person that I think people can trust is Tim Lester.
And just real quick, Wegman will have 2 years left?
Yes, he would have 2 years. So you think about it's now a 1-year investment. It's a guy that can go in there and have 2 years under his belt with this system. And I also think that provides a little bit more stability on that front.
Well, Cade McNamara announces that he's going to be searching for that 7th year. It won't be in Iowa City. Are we looking at something kind of similar to Spencer Petras, Mountain West, something like that? Is that a likely destination? He's a Nevada kid. Maybe the Wolfpack are looking for a quarterback. Is that kind of the area you'd be looking at for Cade McNamara in his final year?
I mean, maybe, Trent. I got to be honest. I mean, you think about this, by the way, might be controversial of me to say, so I apologize in advance. But I think some people owe Scott Dockman and Chad Leifsko an apology.
Yeah, they nailed it.
As far, I backed up what they said on my message board. I can tell my media colleagues feel the same. I'm not throwing shade at Cade McNamara. Everything that they suggested and that I've dropped on my message board throughout the past month has exactly happened. With 2 major leg injuries, was not good this season, was not good last season. Now, again, he was hurt last season. He's fresh off a concussion. Quite frankly, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, if you're leaning on a 25-year-old who has not really left a good taste in the past 2 teams' mouths of the ones he's left, I think you're pretty desperate as a program, quite frankly, at this point. I think maybe he goes the Mountain West. I think he's going to have to go a little bit lower level than that, but it will be interesting. Here's hoping Cade stays healthy next year. He can at least end his football career on a high note, because I can't imagine, the mental anguish it would take for a guy for his football career to end on throwing a really bad interception and after being concussed. I think it's a really rough way to go, no matter how maybe a certain fan or somebody feels about Cade McNamara.
Yeah, it's been the last 3 quarterbacks have been tough. Petras, not loved, obviously Deacon Hill, and now McNamara. So you're Hawkeye fans, you're due for a quarterback. Hopefully there's one under the tree. So if quarterback is the number one target, what do you think position-wise, not necessarily names unless you have one, next position of need would be what in your mind, David?
I think it's unquestionably defensive tackle. I mean, with Y.A. Black departing, with I still think we're going to see a decision from Aaron Graves sometime in the next several weeks. I think he has a legitimate decision to make. I think Iowa needs a big, not necessarily a nose tackle. They need a big body to absorb those double teams. Let Max Llewellyn and Brian Allen go to work as edge rushers. And, quite frankly, I'm in the minority here. I think Iowa needs a defensive edge and as well a go-to pass rusher. I think Brian Allen is going to miss some significant time. It sounds like he's going to miss the spring, if at least it holds true to what we talked about Kirk Ferentz with last time. That's going to be a big blow because I think he could have been a guy that really stepped up next season. He still can be. Max Llewellyn obviously had that great play against Nebraska. He has shown flashes. I think he can do a couple of different things as well. But I think Iowa needs to go heavy on the defensive line. I would love for them to go after a cornerback. And I think they need to invest heavily in a go-to playmaking wide receiver. I just think you have to have a guy on the perimeter that can make plays, that's already proven himself. And if you have to empty the pocketbooks and pay him a little bit more NIL money, I think you have to do that as well. But I also think it's worth noting, absolutely love Terrence Smith, the 4-star wide receiver that signed today. I think if he has he's not going to enroll in the spring. I think if he did, he could have had a shot at really playing next season. But I think he's a different kind of receiver than Iowa's had in the past few years. I think he can be a difference maker. So I think they're going heavy on quarterback, and I think they're going heavy on defensive line. And, we'll see, because quite frankly, there's going to be a lot of people that transfer out of every single program, and I don't think Iowa is going to be an exception.
David, we've talked about all the recruits that are signing today throughout the course of the summer, but one guy we didn't mention is the commitment they got today from down at Armwood High School. A place that's been pretty good to Iowa throughout the years. Alante Dean, what can you tell us about the future Hawkeye safety?
Yeah, that's a really nice win, I think, for the Hawkeye staff, because quite frankly, they were down to the wire when it came between them and at Louisville. Louisville really had a late push on him. I think he's a versatile guy, 6 foot, 200 pounds. He's projected to play safety. Ole Miss, LSU previously offered him, and he was a two-way star for Armwood. He had 21 catches for 547 yards and 11 touchdowns this season. Not bad ratio, reception to touchdown, right? On the defensive side, 27 tackles, 4 picks. The team was 12-1. I think he is a little bit more, I don't want to say necessarily a project, but I think he could be a guy that goes in there and plays the cash. He can go in there and play safety, but he's just a really good athlete from a state that really produces top-tier talent. And I think he went a little bit under the radar to a certain degree as well. So I think this is a very nice, I don't want to say signing day surprise, but this is a guy that I think Iowa has really wanted to get locked down here over the past several weeks.
Trent, any more recruiting? Want to switch to basketball? Let's recap what we saw last night. Just obviously a thrilling finish. How it got to that point was certainly, obviously lack of defense early in the second half. My take on the starting five. Look, Harding and Dix, phenomenal. Why is Dembele seemingly reluctant to go back up? I mean, there was a couple of occasions he got the ball right underneath the basket and passed out of it, as opposed to, taking a 2 or 3 footer. There was a couple of occasions last night that Dembele, I thought, could have gone right back up and laid it in, yet refused to do that. Is he losing his confidence, or what's behind Dembele's reluctance to seemingly get involved offensively?
Man, I got to tell you, I think you're spot on, because that was my big question last night watching him. It just seemed like he's a little bit scared. Like he's almost just second guessing himself, because he has really good athleticism. I still think his basketball IQ is a work in progress. He has some really nice skill set. And at this point, I'm surprised, quite frankly, that Seydou Traore is not starting. But obviously with Traore being out right now, that you're going to have to lean on Lodge Dembele. And I think you're going to be a little bit looser at that spot and a little bit less depth, because who knows what the future of Cooper Koch holds at this point. Quite frankly, I think a medical redshirt is potentially on the table for Cooper Koch if he can't even come back this season. Again, I'm not reporting anything, but I do think if he's out for the next month or so, I think we're really going to have a serious discussion about if that's going to be a possibility. So Dembele, I think, needs to get out of his own head. He needs to play free. And I'll go back to what Frank McCaffrey and a lot of Frank McCaffrey's past players have said. You have to prepare so hard that it's second nature when you go out and play. You're not thinking about the game plan. You're not thinking about every move. You're just doing what you've prepared to do. Because I like Lodge Dembele as a player, as a project. Should he be starting right now? I don't think so. But I also see the upside of trying to get him established. And again, if Iowa is going to have to battle through all of these injuries, you're going to need a guy like Lodge Dembele to be able to be productive on the floor. And I thought last night was probably his worst game, not just in the starting lineup, but maybe during his Hawkeye career.
Really struggled out there. Yeah, need to get his confidence back as they wait for a Traore to come back. So Fran said earlier in the week it was going to be a game time decision. Saw in the middle of the afternoon that he was going to be out. What do you anticipate for Saturday? That is a big Michigan team with a big front line. You need some help in there. Do you anticipate Traore's got a relatively good chance of playing, or is going to be waiting for Iowa State?
Yeah, I think it's going to wait till Iowa State. And I have not been able to catch up with some sources yet to get the latest on him, but I'll tell you what I saw last night. He was walking last night with a small but very noticeable limp. I just don't think he's close to 100%. Maybe if he's 80 to 85%, you can throw him out there. But I also think you're missing part of his best attributes to the game. His athleticism and his physicality, especially on the defensive end. And as you mentioned, Michigan is a big team. They're coming in very, very motivated. Had a big win last night against Wisconsin. That's going to be a confident bunch. So I would be a little bit surprised if Traore is able to go. I think you're trying to save him for Iowa State. But again, I think at this point, I'm still waiting and seeing, because I go back to what I saw when he went down. I'm the farthest thing from a medical expert, but it did look like more than just a small sprain of that ankle. It looked at least a little bit more severe just based off the eye test. So maybe he lives in the training room with Brad, and Brad's probably working overtime at this point between Josh Dix, Peyton Sanford, Cooper Koch, and Seydou Traore. But I do think Seydou Traore is more likely to play against Iowa State than he is to play against Michigan.
Get you out of here on this. Iowa's bowl destination is to?
Man, you're really throwing me there. I'll tell you, I think there's two. I think they could either go to Charlotte or they go back to Nashville. I'm of the belief right now that the ReliaQuest Bowl is still on the table, but I would be a little bit surprised if they opted to take Iowa over a Michigan team that just won at Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. David Eicholt, you'll have it covered. HawkeyeInsider.com.
Trent Condon back with you one final time. Locked On Hawkeyes. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Wrapping things up and the portal buzz that is out there. So, of course, we started the week with Miller Moss. Then it evolved into, here's Connor Wegman from Texas A&M. So, a couple quarterbacks. There's going to be a lot more. And anytime there's any kind of connection, any kind of big name at the quarterback position, I was going to get involved. What we continue to know is Iowa is looking at quarterback. And an announcement today that James Rezar is going to be leaving the program. So James Rezar comes in from Jacksonville. You look at his offers, some mid-tier ACC offers, but when we had Brian, our recruiting analyst here on Locked On, he's a Florida guy. Saw him a ton. And you could tell, look, he's not going to come and rip kids. I mean, it's unfair. It's certainly not what you want to see. But he was pretty forthright in his thoughts that it was going to be a struggle. James Rezar is a tremendous athlete. But the question always is, does he have the ability to be a quarterback, certainly at the Big Ten level? And many people believe that the answer to that was no, he didn't. This is a good thing for Iowa. It is time now to clean out this quarterback room. It is time for the Hawkeye program to move forward and to give Tim Lester the keys to what he wants to do at the quarterback position. I mentioned it before. Every Dares, you know this. Jackson Stratton was fifth team when he showed up. Jackson Stratton didn't have a home. He leaves Colorado State. We're not talking about a program exactly swimming with quarterback prospects. He goes into the portal, and he didn't have offers. He didn't have people that were willing to bring him in. Iowa finally did after Tim Lester saw him throw, went to an open camp with other guys that were uncommitted, and there's going to be a ton of that certainly this offseason. You just wait. With this new rule, with 105 now being the roster limit, you're talking about every program in the country, 20, 25, sometimes 30 guys that were, a part of their roster that aren't going to be there. There are going to be a lot more stories like that. But he was able to find a guy that was 4-17 at Colorado State and go 2-0 with him. Jackson Stratton wasn't great. Jackson Stratton isn't great. It just gives me hope because the previous regime at the offensive spot couldn't have done that. I mean, you look at the players that they brought in. It was terrible. And Ken O'Keefe, his lasting legacy at the end was his inability to identify the right kind of quarterback for Iowa. Now you have Tim Lester that found Jackson Stratton, that brought in Brendan Sullivan. Again, neither guy that are elite. I'm not even sure if either of them are good Big Ten quarterbacks, but they were competent. And that was a step forward from what we saw going out there and just grabbing Cade McNamara right away, bringing in Deacon Hill to be his backup. Tim Lester identifying quarterbacks is a good thing. And James Rezar, you feel terrible. Look, he was here a couple of weeks on campus. Tim Lester said, "You're a wide receiver." They moved him out of there. He knows what he's looking for. He knows what it takes to be a quarterback. He played at an incredibly high level. In fact, Tim Lester, this guy was being recruited by Florida under Spurrier, and an injury derailed that. He ends up at Western Michigan and sets all kinds of records there. He's a talented quarterback and a talented quarterback coach. He knows what he's looking for. And though Iowa might not get the Miller Moss or the Connor Wegman or even that top shelf kind of quarterback that is out there, I'm okay with that. I'm okay. But the people that continue to believe that Iowa just run it back, no, you need talent. And for a team next year that is going to take a step back, for a team that isn't going to be as good, certainly roster top to bottom than they were this season, and a schedule that is incredibly more difficult next year, you need to upgrade the position. You need a guy that can not just manage games, that can do okay. You need a guy that can win you football games. That guy is not on your roster right now at the quarterback position. Go out and find him. You have to find him to keep your head above water. And where we started today, Kirk Ferentz, make it a successful 2025 for Coach Ferentz. We're out of here. Back with you tomorrow, Locked On Hawkeyes. We will break down that recruiting class, take a deeper look inside of that, get you set for the weekend. Iowa making the road trip out to Michigan for their second Big Ten game on the men's side. Big one for the women's team as well. Lucy Olson going to be back against Tennessee. We'll talk about that matchup. Tom Kakert's going to join us from HawkeyeReport.com. A busy show coming up on a Football Friday. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. Don't forget, we got you covered. Whatever your team is, your favorite NFL team, MLB, NBA, NHL, all there. But not just that, we got Locked On Fantasy Football. How about Locked On Bets with Lee Sterling? Locked On Big Ten with Craig Sheeman. He's got football and basketball covered as we get ready for the Big Ten championship game. Oregon, Penn State. I had half of it right. Not the half you think. I have to look back at my notes exactly where we were prediction-wise. I think I had Penn State there, though, if memory serves. That aside, we are with you, and Craig's got you covered on Locked On Big Ten. Game number 2 for a lot of teams in basketball in the Big Ten. Busy weekend coming up. Thanks for being with us, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Go Hawks.